I grew up in the late 70s and 80s in Chinatown. My parents still live in the building that I grew up in. I grew up in an apartment that had two small bedrooms, but it was always multiple families. I was living with my two aunts, my uncle, and my grandparents, my sister and I, and also my parents in a tiny two-bedroom, which we had bunk beds in the living room, bunk beds in both bedrooms. At any given moment, we had about a dozen people living in our apartment. So there's always a need for affordable housing.
AFI's housing is really meant to be a bedrock for our low-income immigrant communities to have a safe and secure place to live, to grow, to nurture their families so that they can advance, achieve economic mobility, and achieve the American dream. We have developed over 1,200 units of affordable housing, and it ranges from very low income housing for people transferring out of homeless facilities because they have housing instability, to low income housing, all the way to middle and moderate income housing for working class families. In a few months, we'll be welcoming the first tenants into our East Village Homes affordable housing project. Really, that project is important because it reflects the makeup of that East Village area. We're building homes that look like the neighborhood, and that we ought to cover folks that are unseen sometimes while making sure there are homes for everyone. And so those projects are so important to maintain the character of our neighborhoods.
This is a new construction, 45 units inclusive of one supers unit. There will be 8 set-asides for the formerly homeless. So for the 36 units that are available, so far to date, we've received over 32,000 applications. So that also highlights a huge need for the area, for the neighborhood, and for this community for affordable housing. So the other project that we are working on in this area, it's called Lower East Side ANCP. Because this is a co-op, the tenants here can start building generational wealth. They can own a piece of New York, they can own a piece of something, their own homes for themselves, and pass it on to future generation. A lot of these city-owned sites are also tenement buildings, century-old tenement buildings, walk-ups, and in disrepair. So for those buildings, we're actually doing significant rehab. For tenants who are living there, they will have to be temporarily relocated into apartments. We find apartments near their communities so they are not relocated too far from their schools or from their jobs and from the communities that they're familiar with.
So we lived on 10th Street, Lower East Side, and we've been there for around 30 years. It was not the greatest condition. It was like a hazard for grandma. Like the meetings, they kept telling us like, oh, like this building is gonna be redone, it's gonna be redone. And like when I was younger, I would just be like, okay, like, it's gonna happen eventually. And some of my family members were like, oh yeah, but like, like it's an old government building. Like, I don't know if this is gonna like be this and that. So grandma kind of lost hope on that idea. It was just overwhelming, like ridiculously overwhelming, but you guys made it super simple, absolutely accommodating. You guys were super like generous in listening to grandma and giving us hope.
Thank you.
Even during the height of the pandemic, when we had the strictest shelter-in-place protocols, our staff was out there putting themselves in danger just to keep our building safe, making sure that those who did not have food and were at risk of hunger had food on their tables through our food pantries. These were some of the things that we did for the last 2 years nonstop and are still doing today to make sure our communities stay alive. And everything we do is really for that end.
They need to regrounding caulking, change the shower head, and if the faucet is damaged or broken, need to replace it.
I do leasing and some of the tenant income certifications for all our tenants. Everything from translations is like, they need repairs in their apartments and they need to explain what needs to be addressed, so I can translate for anybody in the company.
I'm the person in charge for anything. It has to be when collect rent and Section 8 also subsidies. Customer service is like when the tenants like coming to you and they need help in case they have to renew leases, they have to renew subsidies.
For-profit organizations, throughout my career, it's always been about the bottom line, which I understand. I get that. People was always, second or third on the line, to be quite honest with you. Not here. Surprisingly and refreshingly, people come first. This whole organization cares more about people than any organization I've ever been a part of. It's all about, it's people and their needs and their concerns and their shelter and their home life, their quality of life comes first above everything else.
We are planning to develop a 90-unit family with children, purpose-built transitional housing facility. And this is extremely important because this is a way and a path for these families with children to get back on their feet.
Some people assume that when they think of someone who has housing instability, it is the person that's sleeping on the sidewalk or they're huddling on a bench in a public park. A lot of people, for example, are overcrowded in apartments that may be already housing 2 to 3 families, and they just need more space for their family to grow. They might not have a lease with the current landlord and they're paying cash month to month and it's not secure enough for their family. Or sometimes they are recovering from a disaster, a flood in the basement that they lived in, a fire in their building.
Out of that need, we believe that there is a strong purpose for building transitional housing that can really fill a gap in the types of housing that's currently available in Flushing, to provide a pathway for families with children to be able to get the housing assistance, apply for housing vouchers, rental subsidies, and receive the support in finding landlords who will rent an affordable apartment for them. And through that assistance, be able to find permanent affordable housing for their families to be permanent residents in the neighborhood.
I chose to work at a nonprofit because I believe in AFI's mission. Someone gave me, my family, a chance to make it in this community. Someone gave me a chance, and I believe that everyone deserves a chance. Everyone in this community deserves a chance to survive and thrive.